Becca Puglisi is an international speaker, writing coach, and best-selling author of The Emotion Thesaurus and other resources for writers. Her books have sold over 1 million copies and are available in multiple languages, are sourced by U.S. universities, and are used by novelists, screenwriters, editors, and psychologists around the world. She is passionate about learning and sharing her knowledge with others through her Writers Helping Writers blog and through One Stop for Writers, a powerhouse online resource for authors that's home to the character builder and the storyteller's roadmap tools. So, can you tell us a little bit about your journey as a writer?
Yeah, I did not grow up writing like a lot of people do. It just never, really occurred to me until I was an adult. I was teaching elementary school and just started writing in 2002. I started with, because I was like in the elementary world, I started with chapter books, picture books, young adult. And then in 2004, just a couple years later, I finished a book, and it was the very first book that I wrote, and I just sent it off to the publishers. Like I just thought, okay, well, this is how it works, right? You write a book and then they published it. And I get a very nicely phrased rejection letter saying, may want to, spend some more time with this, have other people look at it. And I was like, oh, I had no idea that that was a thing. So I then started doing the research and realizing, oh, there's a whole like process to this. And I joined a critique group. It was an online group. It's called Critique Circle. That's actually where I met Angela, who I
Okay.
write, we write all of our books together, the nonfiction books. But we were just both writing fiction at that point, and happened to meet among all of those people and just fell in love with each other's writing, and we became critique partners. And we did that for 4 years. And then we started our blog in 2008. It's Writers Helping Writers now. It was called The Bookshelf Muse when we first started. And then we kind of got into more nonfiction and kind of fell into some things that people really, really liked reading about and wanted more of, and turned towards nonfiction that way. But that's kind of, how it progressed. Yeah, it's it's an interesting, a little embarrassing, but I guess, we all have those missteps along the way where you just don't know what you don't know.
Well, we've all been there, that's for sure. I know I have. I always love hearing people's writing journeys because they're all so different and everybody has a different path to publication, which I
Yeah,
love. And it's
sure.
nice to know that there are different ways to get there. So thank you for
100%.
sharing that. I love your thesaurus series. We talked a little bit about it offline, but I absolutely love them. They're such a helpful resource for writers. How did you come up with the idea?
Well, it started when Angela and I were critique partners. As a new fiction writer, I was seeing like all these repetitions in my own writing. My characters were always shuffling their feet and shrugging their shoulders. Like I could not think of other ways to express emotions beyond these certain cues. And I talked to her about it, and she said, oh my gosh, yes, for me, it was something else. I think it was frowning or something. And we realized we both had this problem. So we started keeping lists of emotions and the major emotions and all the different things we thought that you might do if you were feeling angry or frustrated or happy or whatever. And we started using those lists with our writing to vary the cues that we were using to show what the character was feeling. So that's how the Emotion Thesaurus got started. It was just a couple of really informal lists that we had put together. Then when we started our blog in 2008, we thought, oh, that's something we had a problem with. Our whole critique group, when we took it to them, they're like, yes, yes, we all struggled with this. We thought this may be like a universal thing that writers need. So let's put out every week one emotion. We'll just do one emotion each week, and we'll build it. We'll call it an Emotion Thesaurus. And so we started doing that, and it just took off. I mean, everyone was really excited about it and coming back to see, what the next one was and asking for certain emotions. And then people started saying, oh my gosh, can you just put this all together into a book so that we can have it, and we thought, well, I guess, we hadn't thought about it, but okay. So in 2012, we published the Emotion Thesaurus, and it again, it did very well. I mean, right out the gate, people just kind of, we realized that we had hit on an area that it was a universal need for writers, and there just wasn't a solution for it. And so we thought, okay, well, maybe this is like a thing, maybe we've found something that can help people. What else do they need help with? So we kind of looked at our own writing, just as we had with the emotion thesaurus, that we were struggling with conveying character emotion. And we thought, well, what else do we struggle with that other people might be struggling with? And immediately we hit on characters and building realistic characters, well drawn, like rounded characters. And so we wrote the next books, the positive and negative trait books. And then we decided to tackle settings, and then we went on to emotional wounds. And so that's how the series developed, not just with the topics, but also I think the format was key, because the books that were out there were very narrative. They were like, just the typical nonfiction book that you see, but the format that we used was really easy for people. And they didn't feel like they had to read front to back, which is not how our books are really meant to be read. You have the front matter that's instructive, but then the entries, you really can just pick and choose the ones that you need or the ones that you're curious about. And I think that the format really was helpful in a way that wasn't really out there at the time. So
Yeah, absolutely. So for anyone watching, absolutely go check out these books. They're so helpful. They've got amazing details. Because I always find in the moment when you're writing, it's sometimes challenging to come up with all those bits and pieces and what
sure.
makes it unique to be in a coffee shop that isn't just the sound of coffee
Mhm.
being made or something like that. So they really inspire me to think further and kind of put you in the setting while you think of other settings.
Yep.
But I am, because it's such a valuable resource, I am curious how you approach to, what's your approach to creating these guys? Like, what is the research process like?
Um, well, Angela and I start with a topic, and we brainstorm what information about this topic would be useful for writers. Like how does it apply to a story, and where might writers not exactly know how to connect the dots? And we try to think from a character arc perspective and story structure and see where it fits in, because sometimes it's really more one or the other. There's story elements that really apply very strongly to character arc or to story planning. And we just want, people to be able to use whatever story element we're talking about thoughtfully and deliberately, and not just randomly, because that's kind of how we start as writers. We have ideas and we don't exactly know how to fill out the story, so we include things that we're interested in or that we're excited to write about, and then you end up with the story that's kind of not really cohesive, and things don't really fit together. And so our big hope with the topics that we write about is that they will help authors kind of put all the puzzle pieces together so that the character and the story makes sense. So that's kind of where we start, is what do people need to know about this topic? Then we come up with a huge list of possible entries. So like for emotions, there's always way more than we can use. And we have to just then whittle it down, because if we're going to make a book and we want it to be affordably priced, we have to control the size of it. And so we are limited to a certain number of entries. So we have to take this big, huge list that's like way out of control, and then figure out, which ones do we want? Which ones are too similar? We don't really need both of these. Which one, this doesn't even fit? I don't know what we were thinking. And we finalize the list, and it takes it takes a lot of time, a lot of coffee and caffeine to figure that out between the two of us. When you think about a book like Occupations, there's just thousands of things that you can include. We're getting ready to do a new thesaurus at our blog, which is kind of our process. We introduce a thesaurus there to kind of gauge interest and see how it works and if people respond to it. And that kind of informs us if we're going to turn it into a book or not. But we're getting ready to do something on secrets. Character secrets and how they play into stories and how we can use them. And just straight out the gate, we have like 250 different secrets, and so now we're like, okay, have to cut it, way down, figure it out. We want to include popular entries that everybody wants, like the really obvious ones that lots of people use because that's going to be most useful to people. But then we also like to include a sampling of things that are a little more unusual, because we want people to think outside the box. That's kind of where we're at with these books, is that we want to provide the information that people need, but we want them to make it specific to their character and their story. So, when we wrote conflicts, we did the obvious ones. We did, a breakup, the death of a loved one, an unexpected pregnancy, kind of the things that lots of people need. But then we included things like being cursed, or being poisoned, or being targeted by a supernatural force or a monster. So we want to have this, we want it to be a brainstorming resource as well as an informational resource. That's how we kind of figure out the entry portion. And then we have the front matter, which is always instructive. It takes that element and kind of breaks down why this is important. What are the common problems that people have? How do you write it well? There's almost always an element of show don't tell for each of the topics, because we know that that's just a common area of struggle for writers. And that's kind of how we put it all together.
Well, first of all, count me in for the pre-order on the secrets one.
Awesome.
What I really enjoy in the books that you have, especially like in the emotion, the wounds, getting into that kind of topic, the character pieces. How do you approach researching the psychological and emotional aspects of characters? Because there's the pieces you put in the thesaurus are so authentic, so real. And if you've experienced any of those emotions, or if you have some of those positive or negative traits, it feels quite real when you're reading them. You're like, yeah, I do that when I'm angry, or whatever the case. So how do you go about researching that aspect?
The research is significant. I mean, because we both are interested in psychology, and we recognize that the most authentic characters are going to really closely mirror real life people, and so we have to get the psychology piece of it right. And so there's always some level of psychology built into whatever it is that we're trying to write about. And we recognize that that's real. It's not just something that you're making up. I mean, this is real people's experiences, real people's responses. So we read a lot about psychology outside, when we're not actively planning a book, because again, we both kind of have an interest in that. And with each book, we just build our base of knowledge. When we started with emotions, we were looking at almost more physiology than psychology. It's when you're feeling this is what your body's doing. This is what's happening inside that you can't even control. This is where subtext comes in, where you're feeling something, but you don't want people to know. So you're acting a different way. And that's kind of where it started. And then with positive and negative traits, we really got into personality and character traits and where those come from. They're not just randomly chosen or thrown together because you think they're interesting or cool. They come from actual experiences and people and influences. And so that was, what we learned from that book. And then we went on to the wound thesaurus, which, I mean, that was like massively like full of psychology and, trauma and how it impacts people, and the fears and the lies that people believe because of the things that have happened to them, and how it changes their behavior and it creates problems for them, and then they have to deal with those problems. I mean, that whole book was just basically, it felt like a Psych 101 course for us. That was just a ton of psychology in that. So every book, I feel like we are just building on the base that we've already learned about real people and how they tick, and how we can get that into our stories.
So when you're working on a new one, you alluded to this a little earlier about how you decide which entries to include. But do you use any criteria to determine what's most valuable for writers?
We like to focus on the things that are most helpful to the most people. We try not to get too niche. We've had a lot of interest in certain genres and writing, guides for romance or mystery or different things. But we want to be able to reach as many people as we can. We want our resources to be able to be useful to the most people. So we do try to keep things to focus on things that are a little more general and a little more applicable to different genres and different audiences. That's kind of the first thing that we think about in terms of, you know, when we're narrowing that down. And then, like I said, also bringing in that aspect of what's unusual, what's something I haven't thought of, or what's something that maybe not be quite as mainstream that, you know, I could include, just to keep things interesting and make it a little more fresh.
So have there been any entries that have been really challenging to write? And if so, is there one you're able or willing to share with us and how you overcame that difficulty?
The whole wound thesaurus was really, really hard. I mean, like we planned all of that out and kind of just did it like we would do any other book. And then when we started, we split it in half and we each work on half. And then when they're done, we swap and we edit. And that's kind of our process. But we went kind of our separate ways to start writing. And we both realized we couldn't do it the way we've done other books because it was so heavy. I mean, these are real traumas and horrible things that have happened to real people. And we just felt such pressure to get the information right. And it was just hard to kind of take all of that in and realize that this is what people are dealing with and walking around with on a daily basis. So we had to actually take more time. We had to increase our deadline so that we could write less each day so that it wasn't just quite so heavy. Honestly, that whole book was a real challenge. There wasn't really an entry in particular. It was just the content in general that was hard to deal with. And then the kind of on a lighthearted note, like the negative trait thesaurus, we would text each other or email each other and be like, I think this is me. I think like I have this flaw. I mean, we had so many of those conversations where you just would be, you know, researching and like, oh crap, I think this is me. I think I have this problem. And we'd have to like talk each other down. No, you're projecting. It's not you. But yeah, the wound thesaurus, just the pressure was a lot. We just always want to make sure that when we're dealing with real life content, that we get that right. And we actually had that whole book vetted by a psychiatrist to make sure that we were okay. And actually the negative and positive trait disorders too, because so much of that was, you know, how traits develop. And very often we'll have passages from different books. If they are heavy in psychology and based in real life, we'll have those looked at too by experts just to make sure that we're on the right track.
Wow, lots of research. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's fun. We both like to research, so that's good.
That's why the books are so good.
Right. I hope so.
What advice do you have for writers on how to use the thesaurus effectively without kind of being formulaic and kind of falling into that pit that you mentioned earlier of repeating the same, you know, shuffling of feet or pulling on their ear or whatever it might be?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing to remember is that every character is different. And the character has to drive the personal responses. So it's very easy to pick up one of our books and look through an entry and go, oh, I like this, and try to pop it into your book. And it's just not going to read well. It's not going to all flow because that is not particular to your character. We always tell people to use our guides as a brainstorming resource and to always start with the character. You have to know them really, really well so that you can figure out what their emotional cues are going to be, how they're going to respond to different emotional wounds, what kind of occupations they're going to choose for themselves. I mean, like it all starts with the character. So you have to know your character really well and then use that information to individualize the information in our books to fit your character. So if you were in the emotion thesaurus and you were looking at frustration, you might see one of the lines is tapping the fingers to release energy if you're frustrated. Well, maybe your character is a runner, and maybe instead of tapping their fingers when they're frustrated, they shift back and forth from one foot to the other, or they shake out their hands like runners do before a race. That would be like a sensible way for them to express frustration because of their experience as a runner. Another line from the frustration entry is to run your fingers through your hair in frustration. Well, maybe your character has a beard, and instead of, doing that with their hair, they're messing with their beard. Think about who your character is and what is particular to them, their physical bodies, but also their experiences, their perspectives, just the way that they work, their personality, and tailor the ideas in our books to fit your character. And then you're going to end up with something that is really authentic and unique, because you are making it fit your character and not just using a pat phrase or something like
Right.
that.
Yeah, great advice. So you've done workshops, you've got your books, you've got the blog, you've helped thousands of writers improve their craft. What are the most common mistakes you see writers making, and what's your advice to them to overcome it?
I see a lot of, I keep coming back to this, but a lot of telling and not showing. And I mean, it's a, just, again, it's a universal thing that we all do. Our natural inclination as writers, when we first get started, we got to get the information out there. We want to make sure readers know what we're saying. And so we just tell it, we explain it, we do big info dumps, put all the backstory in there and make sure that they all know, what's going on. And we all know that that is not the most effective way to pull readers in. And so I think that's just a very common problem, because it's one that we all have to deal with at some point and figure out how to do well. So, yeah, that would include, emotions, descriptions, backstory, so many aspects of storytelling. And then just a general, I think, tendency towards wordiness, where you've got rambling sentences, you've got repeated words and phrases, too many adjectives, adverbs to a large degree. For that, I suggest the book Self-Editing for Fiction Writers, which Angela and we went through. One year we said, you know what, we really want to accelerate our knowledge of fiction writing. And so we took a year and we picked, I think, 4 or 5 books, craft books on how to write well. And we read them separately and then we discussed them together. And I really think that helped us grow much quicker than we would have done had we been kind of going along on our own. And one of the books that we did that year was Self-Editing for Fiction Writers. And I still use it whenever I'm editing fiction. It's just got really practical information about a lot of the problems that we have with our writing. You don't have to be an editor. You don't have to have vast knowledge, of how the English language works. So that's a really, really good book if you feel like you need to tighten up the prose to keep things snappy. And then I think the other thing is a big problem is that we rush to publish, or we skip steps in the process because we're just in a hurry to get to the next point. It takes a while. I mean, a story is complicated, and we really need to work through the process, take our time, make a plan for how you're going to get where you want to go, stick to the plan, but value the process, not just the destination. That, yeah, you may want to finish a book or you may want to publish a book, but the whole process has great value all along the way. You're going to be learning, you're going to be growing, you're going to be getting better and improving. And if you skip steps to try to get to the end, you're cheating yourself and you're short-circuiting the process. So that's something I see a lot. I think that's probably good advice.
No, absolutely. And I think unique advice. I don't often hear it's one of those types of passions where you just have to put in the time to learn.
For sure.
Um,
And
you
I
know,
think that's getting harder now, as we progress with technology and AI and lots of different things. It's so much easier to write a book. I mean, anybody now can write a book. I mean, is it a good book? Maybe, probably not. So I think that advice is more important than ever.
So speaking of advice, and the writing process, so writers who are just starting out might be feeling overwhelmed by the writing process and all the information out there and what they should and shouldn't do. What advice do you have for them who are just starting out?
I think the first thing it's kind of old advice, but it's like golden, is to get into a critique group. I think you just don't know what you don't know. And we're so close to our work, it's hard to be able to be objective and see the problems that are there. And, we can't see it when we haven't had the less experience we've had, the harder it is to see the problems. So if you can get into a critique group with other writers who are a little bit ahead of you in the game and have had a little more experience, they are going to be able to help you. They're going to be able to show you what's wrong in your writing. But they're also going to be able to just help you with the knowledge that they have. And I always found, I was very surprised to find that my critiquing other people's work helped me almost as much as I thought I was helping them, because as I'm looking at their work, you're able to see it just through a different lens. But then you're able to see, oh my gosh, okay, I recognize that. And then you start recognizing it in your own writing. It is a game changer. I think that everybody who's writing fiction, particularly in the beginning, needs to have that feedback and that dialogue with other people who can fill their gaps and kind of point out the blind spots, because we just don't see it ourselves. And then I think the other thing that I would say is to set reasonable goals. I think that we have great ideas and we have a lot of ambition. And we think, we have this idea we're moving towards and we're going to get there, but then life happens. And, we're unable to meet the goals that we had set, and then we get frustrated and we get discouraged. I think it's just, I think we've all been through that. And we also kind of have a tendency to adopt the goals that other people have without really taking into account our own circumstances, our own personal bent, how we work best, when we work best. It's different for every person. So, and that takes a while to figure out. So I would say to give yourself grace and give yourself time to figure out what a reasonable goal is, whether it's a word count goal or a time spent writing goal or a publication goal, whatever it is. Make sure that it's reasonable and give yourself grace if you realize you've bitten off more than you can chew.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Anyone looking for Becca and Angela's books, we're going to put some links down where you can find it. We'll link her blog and some other links that she's mentioned about her websites so that you can easily follow her, follow the pre-order that eventually will come on the Secrets book, and grab yourself a copy of the books that help you best. So thank you again so much.
Thank you so much. And I will say that we have, we do have our books, but we have a number of thesauruses at the blog that have not been turned into books, simply because, we started them and realized, okay, maybe, this is good information, but not, enough for a book, not maybe the best for a book format. Secrets we're going to be doing at the blog, and we'll see what happens. It would be great to turn that into a book one day. We'll just have to kind of see once that's up, what the support would, what the response would be like, and how people like it.
Oh, I'll be sending the links to everyone I know just to help turn it into a book.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you again.
No problem. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found these sessions helpful and inspiring. Don't forget to claim your free gifts from our speakers. They're a valuable resource designed to help you on your writing journey. All links are right below this video, so be sure to check them out and check out other sessions for more great insights. Thanks again, and happy writing.